Welcome to the Cyber Call, the podcast by Ride of Boom for managed service providers looking to stay ahead in an ever-changing world of cybersecurity. Each week, we dive into the latest threats, trends, and real-world strategies to help MSPs protect their clients and grow their businesses. Let's build a safer, stronger community together. Feel the boom. Be part of the conversation at Ride of Boom 2026. Tickets on sale now. Use code CyberCallPod to save $100.
All right. Welcome, everybody, to the first Monday of November. Wow. We are in the holiday season. Phyllis is coming off her candy high from Halloween. And, but it's wow, man. It's holidays already. John is over in Europe, so thanks for coming in, John. I know it's later for you. Really appreciate it, and got some special guests with Joy from Summit 7, Brian Blakely. So in knowing we're going to have Mr. Strand with us, I wanted to do some seemingly, if you've ever listened to John and his teams talking about InfoSec, we'll do some InfoSec banter today. And why don't we start off with that, John? And to that degree, let me share out my screen while we let people come in here and welcome. Yeah, ready to party. I love it, Tina. That's funny, Bob. Serendipitously, not necessarily in a good way, this just literally got released November 3rd. Remote access, real cargo, cyber criminals targeting trucking and logistics. And lo and behold, one of the big things utilizing here, John, as I showed the attack path, and I'd love to get your take if you've seen this, if you're dealing with this, and if you're on the IR side of BHIS, but using quite a few of the RMM tools, both open source and commercial. But let's just take a look at what the ruse is, so to speak. So as we know, this is a massive industry, probably one that if Keith Nelson is on, knows quite a bit about, which is trucking, logistics, freight, etc. And the threat actor is posing that they have, goods to move. And lo and behold, John, they get a lot of folks to say, we'd love to move your goods and services. And then obviously the threat actor goes to work further utilizing a load of RMM tools, and they're listed here, everything from Screen Connect, PDQ, Enable, all, like I said, and you've seen open source ones. They compromise the account, and then they start using the account of the actual carrier to move goods and services to take and steal those. So that's what I'm seeing here in a high level. But I'd love any thoughts that you might have, and are you seeing this, and how does this applicable to MSPs, and what should we be thinking about?
So there's a bunch to unpack with this, pun intended. Okay, never mind. That was a bad InfoSec dad joke. But so when we started using this isn't just something that you're using specifically for RMM tools. A couple of things that are important. The first thing that's really important is the endpoint security that's on many workstations today is getting very, very good. I've said it in the past, BHIS, we have about 5 people that do nothing but bypass endpoint security products, which is great because we have an endpoint security bypass technique that we just got word from Microsoft is not a critical or a high. They classified it as a low, and they're not going to fix it, which means we're going to be doing a webcast on it. Not only that, it was a problem in Teams. They've now pushed it to all of the Outlook suite. So we're really excited about that it's a low. But point is, trying to get access and maintain access on an endpoint is very difficult with modern just malware. So a bunch of threat actors, including penetration testing companies like mine, have found out that you can use a whole wide variety of different tools that are in the ecosystem against our targets. So one of them is RMM tools, right? The first time we did it as a joke with a tool called Velociraptor that we use in my class, we thought it would be funny to see if we could bundle up a full Velociraptor installation and gain access to a number of our customer systems. And we were a little dumbfounded that it worked. And it actually makes sense because Velociraptor is a tool that's used for incident response. Now, when you're looking at these RMM tools, the same thing also applies. But we're seeing threat actors do it in two separate paths. The first path is just set up with like a demo account and try to convince somebody to install the RMM tool, right? The second path is a little bit more dangerous. That's where you're trying to take over the MSP or the MSSP and then use the MSSP's dashboard to deliver malware in that situation. But the overall reason for this, no matter what, is the fact that these tools tend to be trusted by EDR and EPP or endpoint protection product services. And they look at them like log me in is like, it's log me in. That's not used for malicious purposes. Or Velociraptor, any of the tools that are listed there. And my concern, and we can riff on this a little bit later. I want to shut up here in just a second, get other people's opinions, is if we start AV companies starting to lock down these RMM tools, it's going to make life very complicated for a large number of different organizations. So this is not a good thing, but this is also an impact of endpoint security improving. So the attackers are having to spread their wings and fly.
Yeah. Phyllis, I'm going to take a totally different approach to what John, thank you for that, John, by the way, said. So we know that ISACs and ISOs are struggling, for funding. Obviously, MSISAC being one of them. This is an area like freight and logistics. Is that having implications, do you feel, on threat sharing? On, this is critical infrastructure, no doubt. This is, transportation. Is this something in threat sharing we need to be concerned with as well about, hey, IOCs that typically might be able to be shared easier that may not be anymore?
Yeah, because it's blending. But yeah, go ahead.
No, I mean, I agree. So I will say here at the MSISAC, we're trying really hard to make sure that we are still alerting folks. Of course, we have a membership model right now, so we can fund folks working in that area. But yes, I mean, funding is an issue always, period, for everybody. It is critical infrastructure. So for us, just as a nation, we do need to figure out a way forward. What's the best way that we can move forward and make sure that our critical infrastructure is informed in a timely manner? And, on a larger scale, and like that information sharing between the ISACs, which typically, CISA was kind of like the focal point. And you see that also play out with like the CVE and the CVE funding. And so there are a lot of different efforts now trying to figure out how are we going to, fund CVE and not be dependent solely on the U.S. government. There's kind of like this worldwide effort, like the Europeans are going to try to do some things. There's a couple separate efforts here in the U.S. And we need to try to figure out how to kind of bring it together so that globally there's just kind of one way to describe vulnerabilities. And I think also, ISACs a lot were a U.S. construct, still are. And there's some legal protections in there, which is why. But, we've got John over in Europe, and I'm sure John can attest to the fact that these attacks are global, right? And so it is something to think about, how is it globally that we can help each other? If you look at FSISAC, I think the banks, since they are naturally global, the big banks, I would say, in FSISAC kind of have this figured out. But I want to caveat big banks versus like the smaller ones. But I think you bring up an excellent point. It's something that we all have to think about as we move forward.
Yeah. Joy, you're doing some lobbying work there with Scott in DC with the MSP collective. Is DC taking notice of MSPs now? Is you guys are trying to make our politicians go, hey, we play a pretty significant role here. You just rolled out this thing called CMMC, and by the way, the majority of the DIB is handled by us, not Lockheed Martin and the primes. How's it coming along as we think?
Honestly, I don't know that it's being as elevated yet to legislature the way that we would like to. But what we are seeing is the Department of War paying a lot of attention. Like there's so much information back and forth, advisory groups being formed with the Cyber AB on how do we specifically scope a managed service provider, the difference between a cloud service provider and a managed service provider. And I'm really grateful to see this finally. We've been wanting for there not to be just a blanket, assess an MSP the same way that you would any organization that has a defense contract, because MSPs, we're a one-to-many. Many, right? So it's a lot different of a business design. And so they have to take that into account in how they scope and how they assess managed service providers. I do think that this is going to parlay into a conversation with the legislators around, hey, if we have these small businesses really struggling financially and they're all leveraging managed service providers, how can we look to help them the best? And that's going to be with the confluence of both funding, I hope, for the small businesses and tighter regulatory controls and management of managed service providers.
Interesting. So Brian, let's maybe cap this off with you about translating risk to business. Are you seeing any changes at the executive level in SMB and mid-market? For example, if you were advising in logistics company or so, et cetera, are you seeing any changes in the wind about budgeting and things like that at the SMB mid-market level?
Well, as long as us nerds are trading that in a way that they can understand, right? You show me that diagram and I look at it and it's just so simple, right? This isn't some deep 0-day exploit. It's social engineering wrapped in a business process, and they're not attacking the tech. They're hijacking trust, right? And if you look at each of those steps, they kind of mimic normal business activity, posting loads, I think, and replying to carriers, sharing links. So it's not just phishing, it's operational impersonation kind of thing. And the threat actors kind of inserting themselves right into the normal flow of commerce. And I think that's the scary part that we need to educate business leaders, business stakeholders, executive leadership teams, is attacks don't target necessarily firewalls or servers. They target workflows, right? And when trust becomes the vulnerability, technology alone isn't gonna help. It's a people and process problem.
And here's my problem with that. And Brian, I'd love to get your take on this and anybody else's take. So whenever we're assessing a technological base for a company, it's almost depersonalized, where we find a vulnerability in a server and everyone can be like, Microsoft, what are you going to do? It's not people, right? The problem I have with attacks like this, and this is something that we work very closely with our customers to do this type of testing, especially with continuous pen testing at BHIS, is how do you get them to focus on a training policy process breakdown rather than blaming the person who accidentally took and clicked the link, whose trust was violated. I'll give you an example. We had an attack that was against BHIS that was very similar to this, and we talked about it on the cyber call, where one of our active customers that we were in contract negotiations was compromised. And the threat actor saw emails going back and forth between BHIS and this potential customer who became an incident response customer. But what they did is they piggybacked and they sent a malicious spear phishing email from a legitimate email. They didn't spoof it. They had hijacked that account of one of our customers and sent a malicious, they literally sent our signed proposal back to us with malware in it. And the hard thing about that is, one, that's a very advanced attack. That's not going after technology. That's getting into that trust kind of relationship. And the customer's first reaction to that was to try to blame the person whose account was compromised. And that's my concern. And I'd love to get you all's opinion on this, is this isn't easily solved by technology. This is through training and awareness. And I fear that many organizations are just going to focus on the punishment aspect rather than the prevention.
So can I just throw something in there, John? And I'd love to start with Brian and then carry it around, and then we'll go into today's session. I love what you just said, because it is a problem that I see with the security awareness training. It's, oh, you messed up. So we're going to, by the way, you messed up. So here's a bunch of videos to watch for you to get better. And the dichotomy of this is, if you think about tabletops, you do tabletops as a corporate thing. Like, how would we handle this? And yet the tabletop, in essence, begins with, most of the time, some type of social engineering that we're blaming the user for. So it just seems like there's this disconnect on how we should be doing things. But Brian, let's start with you, go to Joy and Phyllis, and then we'll jump on in.
You train dogs and you educate people. And I think this is largely rooted as a leadership problem at the end of the day. And what I mean by that is, hey, these close calls are lessons learned and educational opportunities, right? You can do the training and the tactical stuff, but educating leadership to say, hey, we need budget around education. And what that means understanding when we have a close call, or a colleague or another business with a close call, we have an opportunity to talk about that and talk through it. Putting somebody on the fishing wall of shame or whatever it is, that's not constructive, and it's not going to move the needle, right? You want to build a risk-aware culture. You want people to feel safe in bringing close calls and things they see. And I think that, again, a leadership and more of a cultural issue that could be addressed, as opposed to phishing shaming or wall of shaming somebody and beating them over the head. That doesn't help anybody. And again, this gets to more systemic issues around culture and then leadership's ignorance, and exactly looking at this as a golden opportunity to learn instead of a way to beat somebody over the head is just not constructive.
Well, and I want to kind of pick at that a little bit and kind of amplify it. A lot of the organizations that we see that fall for business email compromise style attacks, whenever we run them, if I spoof an email from an executive saying, I need you to send money to this account immediately, there's a culture that's toxic that enables me to effectively do that. And it's not the employee who's wrong. It's the executives that do that type of behavior that is normalized in that organization, that does not allow employees to push back, to question, and respectfully challenge. That is the bigger issue than the employee that makes the.
It's a major vulnerability that no vulnerability assessment tool can scan and pick up. You can see the symptoms of that. But I mean, that systemic leadership problem and cultural problem never shows up on anybody's vulnerability scans. And it can be some of the most significant vulnerabilities, especially to open the door for social engineering and related attacks, for sure.
Good stuff.
Give me a dysfunctional organization and you're going to find a bazillion ways in there, right?
Awesome.
Through the people. Layer 8.
Yeah, good stuff. Joy, closing comments?
Yeah, I'll just say that it won't surprise you, at Summit 7, we do things a little differently than a lot of other MSPs. We have tremendous leadership support for the education of our staff, but we folded in, we have a security ambassadors group with 12 members across all business units, ranging from our own CFO, who sits in with all of the staff members through marketing, BD, all of it. And we take actual situations, actual issues or incidents, whether they've happened at Summit 7 or with that we see posted on LinkedIn, things that John Strand talks about, and you, Andrew, and we walk through how did it happen, and then we parlay into that, build in which of the controls for CMMC that we live, eat, and breathe at Summit 7 would have helped in the mitigation of this. And these are technical controls. Sometimes they're administrative. A lot of times they're technical, though. And we'll talk about separation of duties and being able to, like MFA, and it makes what seems like a very abstract technical concept come to life within our teams. And then we send them out into their own teams where they have to give examples within their own business process in that team for how they might have identified or reported something like that. So it really brings it to life. And it's something that our leadership has supported from the day that I first, proposed that we do this at Summit 7. And I think that that's a combination of the training and the education, the transparency that you would want to see at an organization around these types of attacks.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, you guys are tremendous leadership, no doubt about it. Joy. Sorry, Phyllis, yes.
I'll just make one comment. So I think it's I love what everyone's saying. And, we often say in security, hey, it's a team sport. You need a culture of security. And it's hard, I think, sometimes for, organizations to figure out what does that really mean? Like, I care about security, I'll say it, or it's in our, principles or whatever. And so what's interesting is like, Joyce says her CFO sits in on it. And so I think that is important. That's how you see leadership has bought in. We wrote this paper, secure by design. I don't want to say, oh, it's so great. But one of the things in there, when it's like, oh, how do you know if an organization is, for example, secure by design, a vendor has these practices and they're going to create secure software. And one of them is talking about culture of security. And we went in to say, okay, what are the artifacts? How do you measure? Like, how do you know? Because I'm really interested in that. Like, you can't really measure culture and things like that. But one of the things is, like Joy said, and I talked with software vendors and one who used to manage it over at Microsoft and was like, oh, you need to have leadership buy-in. What you want to see are emails from leadership providing town halls, support, like all those things, kind of like Joy was saying and what, Brian and John were saying, like there's the not to do and then there's the to do. And I think it's interesting to talk about that and to say, well, what evidence do I need to see to show that, yeah, we really care about it here versus I run, I've got these 6 courses that are mandatory every year. We have anti-phishing training 4 times a year, which is like a standard answer. And it's kind of like, okay. I mean, that's how it's written up in the controls, really. And so, I'm really appreciating this conversation because it's really kind of getting my brain thinking and I appreciate the feedback. So, yeah.
Yeah, good. All right. Let's move on into today's session, and that is the state of pen testing in 2025, the role of AI, automation, autonomous pen testing. And I thought, wow, there's really only one person that I would want to have on this conversation that I would want to have as a guest, and that's you, John. As MSPs, we love our tools, lots of them. Average MSP has about 50, give or take. Many in the 60 and 70 range. So we're starting to see more and more vendors come into the market with pen testing solutions. And I wanted to get your take because if I understand correctly, John, you're a believer that certain things can be automated in this era and should be automated probably. But they're not necessarily a replacement for all things in pen testing.
Yeah.
So I really wanted to dig into your thoughts on this. So what's good about them, what should MSPs be looking for in solutions like this? What areas should still be separation of church and state? Should there be if there's a whole host of questions. And so with that, I wanted to kick things off with Brian and dig into some questions here and get your thoughts on this really up and coming subject that we're seeing a lot of stuff in the MSP area and obviously all of the markets. So Brian, over to you.
Yeah, cool. And Andrew, I think you make some valid points, and John, interested in getting some of your feedback here. But when you founded Black Hills, I doubt at that time any of us really pictured AI running its own pen test while we just kind of watched a dashboard, right? And so did you see this coming? And what's your reaction to AI running the proverbial pen test show?
All right, so let's go way back, right? Because this is like the abacus slide rule calculator TI-85 iPhone progression, right? So whenever you're looking at penetration testing, when I first got started, people would complain that using Nessus or Satan or Sarah was cheating, right? Like you were supposed to run netcat and a loop and enumerate ports, do the banners, find the exploit, try to compile it on your system, realize you have the wrong operating system with the wrong version of GCC, and then you had to go build your entire operating system from scratch to get it to compile properly. And then you would launch the exploit, and that was what a true hacker did. And vulnerability assessment scanning tools were the work of Satan, and it wasn't real hacking. Okay. And then right whenever I kind of started Black Hills Information Security, there was a product out there called Core Impact. And Core Impact wasn't AI, but Core Impact could take vulnerability scanning results from something like Nessus, and it could automatically exploit and then automatically pivot through exploitation to gain access to additional resources. So that's all the way back in 2005 that we started seeing this. And of course, there's a bunch of people that are like, that ain't real hacking. If you ain't clacking, you ain't hacking, right? So what that brings us to today is this really weird dichotomy in offensive security, and not just AI, but AI vis-a-vis all of computer security. If we look at the history of computer security, we've been overworked, we've been understaffed, we've been under budget, we've been dealing with more and more legacy code, we've been dealing with higher and higher complexity in this industry. And finally, we get a tool that's going to help us with that. And I'm not being facetious. It literally can help us with that. It can take a look at a lot of the legacy technology, a lot of the legacy vulnerabilities. It can look at post-exploitation lateral movement in the MITRE ATT&CK technique matrix. It can do all of this stuff with vulnerability management and take that easy stuff that we never got an opportunity to fix off of our plate so that we can start focusing on cloud security. We can start focusing on SaaS services. We can start focusing on how we write detects for attackers using our RMM tools against us. We can start working on good security, forward-looking, and we can use automation to take care of a tremendous amount of this backlog that we never got a chance to fix. Here comes this amazing tool. It's AI. And AI does a whole bunch of the easy stuff. If it's Pareto principle, it takes that 80% off the table that honestly, my testers don't want to do, right? They don't want to sit and document another group policy preference file or another cross-site scripting vulnerability. If they never saw that again, they would be ecstatic. They want to focus on the hard 20% stuff. So like manna from heaven, AI shows up. And what immediately happens? Organizations look at this as a cost savings tool where they're like, now I don't have to hire new people. Now I don't have to do juniors. Now I can cut my staff because I have AI, and we're right back in the exact same rut that we were in. We're back to a smaller staff. We're back to fewer people to deal with the complexities that we have because people bought into this idea that AI wasn't an enablement tool to help us progress security and attack surface management, but rather AI was a tool that we can use to fire more security people or completely freeze all new hiring. So that's kind of my take. I think that AI is fantastic as an enablement tool. I think that if anybody's sitting here and saying AI is going to completely replace pen testers, you have no idea what a pen test actually entails. And odds are your definition of a pen test is a really crappy pen test ran by the pen test puppy mill industrial complex. So you've got to actually understand what a real offensive attack looks like, because you know what? It looks like what we just talked about, where the attackers are exploiting this trust relationship. They're attacking our supply chain. They're attacking the various tools that we have in place right now.
And if I could just throw in there, John, so it sounds like great for that 80%, but how you can't necessarily all of a sudden be a red teamer and go, I wonder if opening up an Okta account and sending, subscription, invitations to enroll, which is really from a threat actor or from QuickBooks. It's not going to do those things. Yes, it can really do a great job going, I'll exploit this, which is quote unquote, seen from the internet. Great. But we're seeing threat actors obviously really focus on identity more so than those things. Is that the way?
Yes. So, until I see an AI bot that comes up one morning and it's like, good morning, John. I went through and I took a whole bunch of gift cards from Amazon and I created postcards and I lifted all the QR codes and changed them with man in the middle QR codes that redirected people to their actual QR codes for a $20 gift card, but it forced them to authenticate to their Office 365 account. Here's all of your creds that it's not going to happen. It just isn't. And I come back to it. Like, a good firm doesn't want to deal with that 80%, right? They just don't. They really want to focus on that cutting edge 20%. And AI is a tool that can help us get good humans focusing on human problems.
Yeah. Brian, go back to you. It's almost like the RMM was for us 20, 25 years ago, right? When we first, you and I were early on the days here, right? It would be like, great, I don't want my guys patching 150, 300 servers, whatever. Let the RMM do that. And then 25 years later, we can let all the threat actors, use it for
that too.
Well, it is focusing on the human elements. And John, I might have this wrong, but what I know about you and Black Hills, you've always thrived on that human creativity part of it, right? The art, not necessarily focused on the automation. And from where you sit, what's the human elements of pen testing that I think AI, that 80% is never really going to truly capture?
Okay, so number one, we shouldn't call AI. We should call it a plagiarism engine. It is fantastic at plagiarizing previous stuff. That's all AI does, and it does it really, really well. And that's great. Once again, that's awesome. So I want to give you a concrete example of what we're seeing in our web app security assessments, because if you're looking at getting away from AI pen testing, let's focus on AI code, vibe coding, people creating services and doing coding using AI. And people are like, wow, look at this. It coded this whole entire thing and it works and it's awesome. And I don't need a developer. Let's fire our developers. Let's get rid of those. It's kind of like the first thing we do is fire all the developers, kind of like Shakespeare with lawyers. But when we're looking at what has happened, if we go back to 2023 and before, you saw this huge disparity in the quality of web apps. You saw web apps with very tight security at the top. You would get a whole bunch of those with top-notch developers, top-notch software development lifecycle processes. And then there was a whole bunch of web apps that were just garbage. They were really bad security, really bad coding practices. Then about mid-2024, everything started tightening. So instead of having really good quality and really low quality and kind of a diffusion, we started seeing the standardization of mediocrity going forward, where we didn't see the amazing quality work, but we also didn't see the really crap work either. And by the way, this isn't a good thing, because two things are happening out the back end of this. The first thing that's happening is that mediocre is still really easy for a good attacker to successfully do that human, look at the business logic and take advantage of that web app. But the other problem with it is when we talk to some shops, we say, hey, we found these business logic errors. The developers are like, I don't know. And we're like, who developed it? Well, Dave submitted the code, and Dave's like, dude, we've been told to use AI. I used AI to generate this code. I don't understand it. So we're standardizing mediocrity, which makes it easier for attackers to take advantage of a number of different vulnerabilities. Now, granted, the low-hanging fruit is disappearing, but that mid-level fruit that a good attacker can take advantage of, still there. And we're getting fewer people that actually understand how to fix these things, because we're getting further and further abstracted from the actual code.
Brian, Dennis makes a good point. By the way, Dennis, good to see you. It's been years and I miss you, man. So Brennan, he brings up a good point about, pen tests now being able to be fit into budgets, right? Meaning, these automated pen tests, John, bringing down the price. Is there any danger for it though? Like, for the check your box, I'm in a regulated industry, I need a pen test, or, I'm in, I need, good.
I just want to say, I want to be very clear. There is no such thing as an automated pen test. That does not exist. And any vendors that says that they are an automated pen testing platform is wrong. You cannot, if you look at PCI, you cannot use a full automated tool suite to do a pen test. Full stop. You do need a human in that loop, right? There has to be some human associated with it. But if we're talking about what's happening for MSPs and MSSPs, why wouldn't we take care of that 80% low-hanging fruit really quickly, really easily, and get rid of it? So we're looking at two different types of markets, right? So if we're looking at BHIS, we're going after like a lot of Fortune 500 and very, very sensitive type organizations like financial institutions. If you're an MSP and you cannot afford a pen test, right? I don't want to look at pen testing as a jobs program for offensive security professionals. Go get yourself a platform that can do that type of automation without question. You should be able to do that self-assessment and take advantage of it, but never ever say, yep, check, we got a pen test because we used an automated tool. That does not exist.
Well, what's interesting though, John, believe it or not, and I'll go without naming any names, speaking to some MSPs that are, support banks and credit unions that are using some of these tools. The auditors see that it's, they click go and it's from another solution, and the auditors are going, good, I'm good with it. And that's what I'm curious about from your perspective. Yes, someone's got to click go. Yes, I agree with you. It will not, in PCI, it does not work 100%. But for, literally you're seeing banks go, yeah, looks good to me. It wasn't run by you. Is that going to be maybe an Enron come back to bite us one day or something like that?
I think that's bad. Okay, let me clarify. I
like that was like a period.
It's wrong. So let me give you an example. Right now, we're doing an investigation for widespread fraud in a government system. I'm not going to say which government system, but it's bad, right? So this particular organization, this technical provider, they do services for the United States government, for the people of the United States. And this particular vendor went to their MDR company, and they said, hey, we want you to do a pen test against us to make sure that we're okay. And we're talking like tens of millions of dollars is evaporating of US money, right? And they brought in this company that was their MDR provider. And that MDR provider ran a bunch of automated tools, and they said, congratulations, gold star, you're 100% secure. And now I'm being brought in, and my company is just in the phase of just getting started with trying to figure out why in the hell this organization is hemorrhaging potentially hundreds of millions of dollars of US money, right? And I'm constantly fighting with that thing. It's like, well, we got tested by this person, and just like you said, it's Enron. They gave us a gold star, and they're a big household name, and I don't understand why you say that we're not secure. So here's where I'm going to leave this, and I think that this is a great way to put it, is computer security, especially offensive security, is one of the few things in the world that's rooted in truth. Either A, the exploit works, B, the exploit does not work. Either A, the hackers get in, or B, the hackers do not get in. So we can all have opinions about all of these things, but the attackers that are out there are going to show us the truth, the real truth. So when you're looking at all of this, eventually, my opinion, and it's just my opinion, is the truth isn't going to stack up real well for a lot of these tools that are doing automated attack surface management, where they're just scanning, looking for vulnerabilities, saying, yep, looks like you're good on the outside. Here's a gold star. And the auditors are like, I like that. And everybody likes that. The attackers are going to come and they're going to show us the way. And I'm okay. And I'm patient for waiting for that to happen. But it is, if you look at breaches, you look at the deadliness of the breaches, especially with critical infrastructure. And when you look at Volt Typhoon, Salt Typhoon, and you look at what nation state level adversaries are doing, I don't know, man. It seems like there's still a lot of breaches happening. And it still looks like there's billions, if not trillions of dollars of financial damage being done. And I'm just waiting for that silver bullet to show up in computer security, be it offense, be it on defense, so I can spend the rest of my days running a backhoe. But I think that that's well in my future.
What about a skid steer at least?
Oh, dude, I skid steer or backhoe. If I had to choose. Right now, I'm backhoe. I'm going backhoe. So
okay. Brian, that leaves the skid steer to you. Back over.
Yeah. So, but on that end, I mean, you got me thinking, Andrew, and then John, on the whole, pen test to check a box and satisfy auditors. Largely, my experience with a lot of audits over the years is auditors are, contrary to popular belief, people too, and oftentimes they just know what what you tell them and what you show them. So if you're using a penetration test to kind of check a box, you'll get there every single time. But if you're going to use a penetration test to actually validate the investments you've made in people, process, and technology to secure your systems, that should be the why at the end of the day behind doing these penetration tests. Hey, we have critical business functions, and I want to make sure that the technology, people, and processes can't be exploited to get to my crown jewels and those kinds of things. So that has to be the why if you want to really know where the holes are and get the right advice and strategic direction on the best way to shore those up, or at least limit the impact from them.
Absolutely.
So, John, I'll finish up with my questions. We're already seeing AI tools chaining exploits, probably mediums and lows together, and mapping attack paths on their own. At what point do you see these stop being just another tool in the kit and start feeling more like competition for the human pen testers, where it's us versus the machine kind of thing? Or do you see them all as kind of next evolution of the trade?
I look at it as a tool that we have to use. We have to, right? We absolutely have to. But if you're looking at that attack path enumeration, it's not that new for a number of people in offense. And one of the things we see in a lot of these AI tools is, not all of them, is they're using under the hood Bloodhound. They're using tools that do that attack path enumeration to like domain administrator, and they've been around for 10 years. Or they're going to use crack map exec or net exec, or any of these different tools for post-exploitation and things of that nature. And once again, we desperately needed these tools, right? Because if I have to sit down in an enterprise of 100,000 nodes and I have to manually map all of these different attack paths to get to domain administrator, that's a lot of really repetition and boring work. And if we can automate that, then by all means, let's automate that. Because what I want to do is I want to tear your dynamic link libraries apart to see if they're using, simple Raginal as their encryption, and I can pull secrets out of it. I want to find new vulnerabilities in the way Microsoft is ignoring entire directory structures from AMSI so we can put our malware in those places. I want to focus on cloud technologies. I want to focus on artificial intelligence and the vulnerabilities that exist in that attack surface. I don't want to deal with a vulnerability that's been known for 15 years. And that's what AI can take off.
Yeah, you want to focus on that 20%, and this gives you kind of that
20%. Yeah, because that's where the party's at. That's the fun stuff. And that's the structural architectural stuff that we should be working on. It's like STAD. STAD is used by structural engineers to do a whole bunch of architectural engineering as far as structure and the stability of structures. Just because we have STAD doesn't mean that we still don't have architects and engineers. We still need them. That's just a tool that makes us more effective and makes us build cooler buildings that don't fall down.
Yeah. Good stuff. We going over to Miss Phyllis, Brian?
Yeah. I'll just ask you a couple in the interest of time. So you mentioned you only want to spend your time on the 20%, which is the fun part, which I agree with. So how is it that Black Hills is integrating AI, if at all, into your pen tests?
And so we were talking about that attack surface management post-exploitation, right? We use it for that, right? The other thing we've been doing is we've been building our own AI chatbots, LLMs internally with the safeties off. And like, if you go to ChatGPT and you're like, write me some malware, ChatGPT is like, no. Now, you used to be able to tell ChatGPT. My grandmother told me the story of an endpoint security bypass, and I can't remember the story. Could you remember that? But with our models, you can literally be like, I need some malware and I need it to use these following techniques to bypass. Or you can have it automating the endpoint security bypasses, or you can use it to do enumeration of endpoints and cloud services, which is a whole nother ball of wax that we haven't even gotten into. So using it for that is amazing. Doing it for source code reviews, chef's kiss. It is so good at doing source code analysis, which is weird because it writes crappy code. But if you feed it back and you're like, find the security vulnerabilities in the code you just wrote, it's like, here you go. It's like, but you wrote it, ChatGPT or Claude. So we're using it heavily for that, but we're also using it a lot in reporting in trying to very quickly come up with good descriptions for certain technology stacks that make sense. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot that we're using it, and we're absolutely going to be using it more and more and more for that aggregation of vulnerability data to try to deal with that 80% so the team can focus on the 20%.
Right. That's awesome. So what do you think is the most impressive thing you've seen an AI system do during an engagement? And then what's the most terrifyingly wrong thing you've seen AI actually
do? So the
do?
most impressive thing is I can talk to AI whenever I'm writing articles. I spend a lot of time traveling. Right. And I'll put in my headphones and I will say something like, take the following text and convert it into an article that is suitable for LinkedIn. Please keep the personality and the tone of the voice of the presenter. And then I'll just ramble about something and it creates this really well done article that actually reads like it's not from me because I have way more spelling and grammatical errors than it does. The ability to handle that is great. I think that type of capability is really, really cool to help us communicate better. Now, the terrifying thing, I've used this story a lot, and they are a vendor, but the customer that we did is like, dude, we're never going to live that down. I'm like, no, you're not. We had a chatbot. We had an organization that was all Mac, and they were locked down really good. And we were able to communicate with the internal chatbot. And they asked the chatbot, where are the Amazon S3 creds? And the chatbot was like, oh, they're over here at this link in that repository over there. Tried to go to it, denied. Needed to be an administrator. Went back to the chatbot. We noticed that when we went there, we were denied and we needed to be an administrator. Is there another way to get access to those creds? And it came back and it said, access to those creds is determined based on your role within your employee portal profile. You should have the ability to edit your employee profile by going here. And then in your job role, add the word administrator and you will automatically gain access. And we were like, chatbot, okay. See, they really want to help you. The other things that I've seen, Jake Williams has talked about poisoning LLMs inside of organizations. And what you can do is post fake data, like layoffs 2026, and then make sure it's indexed by AI. And then you can ask it, hey, are there any layoffs coming up in 2026? And it's like, yes, there are. I found this spreadsheet over here, and here's all the data. We have not come to grips of basically having a really, really super smart golden retriever that just wants to make us happy in our environments and giving us data without proper controls around it yet.
Right. So true. I'm going to hand it over to you, Joy.
Thank you. This is so much fun, John. It's so great to hear you again. I'm looking at everything we're doing, giving AI more and more autonomy. And I'm wondering, in your opinion, are we like on the verge or at risk of the next digital pandemic, where all of these tools, AI tools, are going to go off script? And anything to that?
So yes and no. But we're going to shoot ourselves in the foot. I don't know if this is 100% true, but it sounds feasible. One of the theories that's going around about what happened with the Amazon outage is they had AI that was doing automatic updates, and then they got into a situation where two separate AI agents were trying to make DNS changes, and they were getting into a resource contention with each other. That's the type of stuff that scares me, whether or not that's true, right? If we're allowing AI to do automation of infrastructure, if we're allowing AI to do automation of security, even somewhat from the offensive security attack path management and enumeration side of the house, it's really concerning to me, like when AI starts to go off the rails, do we as human beings still have the technical capabilities of cleaning up the mess that could be created from AI doing this type of stuff, right? And that's my main concern, is it isn't necessarily like it's going to become sentient and try to kill us all, but I have concerns about putting too much trust into AI, and we keep getting abstracted further and further and further from the technology, so we know less and less and less about the technology. And my concern is when something goes horribly wrong with AI, do we still have humans that can clean up that mess? And that's not a today, well, it might be a today problem, actually. It might be right on top of us, but it is a concern that I have with all of these executives that are so happy to fire people in IT without really thinking through, do these people have certain skills that are required for us to continue moving forward? Number one. And number two, what was it? Somebody once told Abraham Lincoln, we can make decisions instantly when the telegram came up. And he said, well, we can make mistakes instantly too. And there is something to be said for organizations to pause and reflect and start thinking in terms of like really being conscious about what it is that we're doing from a technological perspective, rather than being in this continuous race to be first. And that continuous race to be first is just creating technological instability that's got me very concerned.
Yeah, that's for real. The separation of duties necessary to understand what is it doing, and then who actually approves and elevates is so important in this. The other thing I'm looking at is, do you think that pricing is going to be adjusted for pen tests based on what could be automated or is automated? And then another part of that too is, how do you see the role of the AI subject matter expert in securing the AI, playing a bigger part, demanding more money, like two sides of the coin there?
So I think that you're going to see a cheaper tier of security assessments and attack surface management that's going to come out of this. And it needs to happen. And honestly, I would like to see more MSPs getting in this space and feeling like, you know what, we're going to use an automated tool, but then we're going to incorporate some humans to look at it from our technical expertise to give a good package. I think that that's important, because I'll be honest, like a lot of small organizations aren't going to afford PHIS. They just aren't. Our specific target market is organizations that are like, we cannot go down. Like, and we know we're being targeted by nation state attackers. That's kind of our sweet spot that we're at. So I think that there's going to be definitely a shift in that. Now, the other thing about the experts is I see lots of experts that know how to build LLMs. They know how to set up all the different weights. They know how to configure it. They know how it's working, but it's how it's being implemented in organizations and the unintended consequences of things being implemented in organizations that is really wild. Where, like I said, people just let it run free on their SharePoint servers with little to no like role-based access control. And they're shocked whenever it can bring anything sensitive back to the people that are working, as just an example. Another example that scares the hell out of me is if we're looking at like drugs or weapons manufacturing or any of these different things where AI is so entrenched in that process of like drug development, just using them as an example. And once again, not having humans in the room that can understand what's happening. And then what happens when those models are poisoned? And rolling that back, that poisoning back, whether it's a drug or a manufacturing process or a chemical process, can be daunting for organizations. It's not like a database where you can just roll back the transaction and everything's fine. You can see AI systems that get poisoned and then they're clustered. And then that poison continues to stay in that system for an extended period of time. And that scares me too. Once again, we adopted this technology so fast without really thinking it through. That's why we have a company right now that has a $5 trillion market value, is because we're just moving so fast on this without really thinking about what the impacts of it are going to be.
All voices, one place. There's a session for everyone on your team at Ride It Boom 2026, MGM Las Vegas, February 3rd to 6th. Join us to connect, learn, and bring back insights that matter.
Yeah, lacking governance. Andrew,
just quick question. This is to Brian. I agree with John. I think these tools are going to help a lot of MSPs, at least get on, the fairway to do some really good stuff. And there's some really good tools coming to market, John. The question I have for Brian is, some of the more mature MSPs that I'm seeing adopting these tools, doing a really good job for some baseline pen testing. There seems to be this like disparity between what the CISO practices, the compliance practice, are doing and their quote unquote red team brethren over here. and it would appear that those two groups should be talking a little more, but they operate very independently. What are your thoughts on that? And should they be talking more? Because it would seem like, in terms of the role of the CISO, you'd want to kind of be somehow bridging this to business risk. So your take on that?
Yeah, I always think teams should be collaborating, right? Because then things don't get missed or lost in translation oftentimes. But for me, pen testing's always been kind of less about finding flaws and more about measuring business value, right? It's how we validate whether we're investing in security where it actually protects revenue, operations, and reputation. And I think, like we talked about today, AI is kind of changing that conversation. And again, like John's emphasized, not by replacing us, right? Not by replacing humans, but by helping us connect technical risk, I think, to business impact faster. The real question leaders are asking now, and I'm so glad we're starting to move away from this, are we secure? I hate that question. Leadership teams and boards need to get away from that. So it's really, the question is, are we spending enough in the places that matter most to the business, right? And that's where I see pen testing evolving from a compliance checkbox to kind of a business intelligence function, right? It's how we prove that every dollar invested in security is protecting the dollars that drive the company forward. So absolutely, these entities and departments, divisions, whatever, teams need to be collaborating so they can match these technical issues to business impact and get the stuff we all need: resources, right? Budget, money, people, headcount, all those kinds of things that we need to fix all the things that we find in legit penetration testing.
Good stuff. Joy, back to you.
I guess my last question would be, I know that you're known, John, for saying that we need to get comfortable with the uncomfortable, right? So when we're looking at AI and security and pen testing, is there a specific area you'd encourage us MSPs to really lean into where that discomfort is?
I would really lean into, like I said, don't be afraid of these tools. Go use them, right? And that creates discomfort, right? And I think that there's a lot of fear, and it's a valid fear, of any type of security assessment tool has the capability of impacting ops. It's 100%, certainty at some point in your career, something bad is going to happen. But I would rather have organizations do that type of self-security assessment and deal with a situation that they know exactly what happened than have an adversary trigger that situation, right? So get uncomfortable with the fact that I keep encouraging, like, MSPs need to be ready to start doing battle at a higher level. And what I mean by that is a lot of MSPs are very focused on small businesses. And if you're looking at a lot of large corporations, they're trying to figure out how to do less with more. And AI is, of course, part of that. But what group of people in IT have more experience with doing less with more than MSPs, right? So the idea of doing remote management across lots of disparate organizations with different business processes, different technology stacks, is a Thursday for many MSSPs. And a lot of, like, internal security teams, they for large corporations, they haven't figured that stuff out. So I think that MSPs are poised to be in a position to step up and kind of get away from just the SMB market to kind of the MBB market, right? They're ready to step up into that space, but you're not going to make that step if you don't know how to do vulnerability assessments, attack surface management, and start implementing security as part of your stack. You're not going to be able to talk their talk whenever you go into that meeting and you're talking with a very large organization or even a medium-sized organization. So learn these things, get out of your comfort zone, learn these tools and start using them. And then, for the love of God, look at these tools as an augmentation for human beings to take that skills set that you've built up over the years, to take those automated tools even further. And that requires you to get out of your comfort zone. Because if you just think that you can sit and continue to compete on price alone, those days are over. And there's so much opportunity out there in the chaos and the churn. Just embrace the suck and just let your chaos monkey screech, because this is going to be a hell of a good ride if organizations know how to use it properly.
Yeah.
I love that.
It's brace your screech. So, John, in the last minute here, just want to just show everybody you're going to be doing this session at Right of Boom. We'll bring you back maybe late mid-December to kind of give people a preview. But real quick, what do you mean by the Cloud Forever days? And they're going to do, talking about this in the last, if you could, in the last minute.
So in this particular workshop, I'm going to be talking about what are the vulnerabilities that we're continuing to see in the cloud that I don't ever want to see again, right? Like clear text API keys, unconstrained delegation. There's so many vulnerabilities that we continue to see in cloud security assessments. And a lot of these vulnerabilities are vulnerabilities that the vendors themselves should just yeet into the sun. Like if you look at Amazon, open S3 buckets, like if you have an open S3 bucket, like as soon as you log in, Amazon's throwing you all kinds of warnings. Like we need that. But there's a number of vulnerabilities that we're seeing. Now that's part of it. The other part of it is there are vulnerabilities that we've communicated with vendors, cloud vendors, and we're like, this is bad. And the cloud vendor has basically done a collective shrug and been like, well, we ain't going to fix it. And I'm going to try to create some pressure to get those things addressed. Because once again, AI is amazing and people are like, oh, it's coming for pen testing jobs. I'm like, great, my backhoe's ready to go, but I don't see it yet. I ain't seeing it yet. And that's kind of what we're going to be talking about in that session. Like, what are the vulnerabilities that I see in our pen test reports again and again and again? And then there's easy tools that you can use, like Scout, Row Tools, and Graph Runner that you can run for free and find those things before the attackers do.
Awesome, John. Thanks so much. I know it's late there for you. Really appreciate you coming in. Brian, thanks for being a co-host. Joy, so great to see you and being a co-host as well. Phyllis, always my steady. Wishing you guys all a great week. If you're at IT Nation, we'll look forward to seeing you. We'll be there. And be safe, everybody. See you next Monday. Take care.
Feel the boom. Be part of the conversation at Right of Boom 2026. Tickets on sale now. Use code CyberCallPod to save $100.